coffee mug hit the kitchen counter with the kind of finality that makes you wonder if your marriage just died along with your morning routine. Beth stood there in her yoga pants and designer tank top, looking like she'd rather be anywhere but in our kitchen talking to anyone but me. I need 2 weeks, Gabe, just 2 weeks to find myself. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I almost laughed. After 16 years of marriage, Beth Parrish wanted to go on a spiritual journey. The same woman who couldn't find her car keys without GPS was going to find her soul. Find yourself where, exactly? I asked, stirring sugar into my coffee with the patience of a man who'd learned not to react too quickly to his wife's announcements. Experience had taught me that Beth's dramatic declarations usually had hidden agendas. Does it matter? I just need space. Time to think about who I really am. I studied her face. Beth had always been pretty in that carefully maintained suburban way, blonde highlights touched up every 6 weeks, gym membership she actually used, skincare routine that cost more than my truck payment. But lately, there'd been something different. A restlessness that went beyond her usual complaints about our quiet neighborhood or my work schedule. What brought this on? I kept my voice neutral, but my electrician's instincts were buzzing. When circuits start acting up, there's always a reason. Same with wives. Nothing brought it on. Can't a woman want some time for self-reflection without her husband interrogating her? There it was, the defensive tone that meant I was asking the right questions. Take your 2 weeks, I said. The girls and I will manage fine. Beth blinked, clearly expecting more of a fight. Just like that? Just like that. I took a sip of coffee and watched her process my easy agreement. When do you want to leave? Today. I've already talked to my sister. She's expecting me. Of course she was. Beth's sister lived 3 hours away in Portland, which would make it convenient for whatever Beth was really planning. I'd been running Parrish Electric for 12 years, built it from a one-man operation into something that employed 8 people. You don't succeed in business without learning to read people, and my wife was broadcasting signals louder than a fire alarm. I'll help you pack, I offered. That's not necessary. I've already got everything ready. Already packed. For a spontaneous spiritual journey. Right. Our daughters, Becca and Brianna, took the news better than I expected. 15-year-old Becca just shrugged and asked if she could have friends over while Mom was gone. 13-year-old Brianna, always the more perceptive one, gave me a look that said she knew something was up but wouldn't push it. I watched Beth load her BMW with enough luggage for a month, not 2 weeks. She kissed the girls goodbye with the kind of dramatic flair she'd picked up from too many reality TV shows, then turned to me. I'll call you when I'm ready to come home. Take your time, I said, meaning it more than she knew. After her car disappeared down Maple Street, I stood in our driveway, feeling something I hadn't experienced in years. Relief. The house felt lighter without Beth's constant undercurrent of dissatisfaction. That first week passed peacefully. I cooked dinner for the girls, helped with homework, and caught up on some projects around the house. Becca brought friends over, and Brianna started talking more at dinner, sharing stories about school and her friends that she usually kept to herself when Beth was around. It was on Thursday of the second week that I found the iPad. Beth had left it charging on her nightstand, forgotten in her rush to start her journey of self-discovery. I only picked it up because Brianna needed it for a school project, and that's when I saw the notification that changed everything. A text message preview from someone named Jay with a photo attachment. The preview showed enough to make my stomach drop, but I opened the full message to be sure. The photo was taken in our bedroom. Our bed. Beth was in it, along with a man I recognized immediately. Jon Casey, my business partner and supposed best friend for the past 8 years. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the screen, feeling like I'd been sucker punched. But underneath the shock and anger, something else was building. A cold, calculating rage that reminded me why I'd been successful in business. When someone tries to screw you over, you don't get mad. You get even. I scrolled through more messages, each one worse than the last. Beth and Jon had been planning this for months. The 2 weeks to find herself was just the opening move in what looked like a plan to leave me, take the girls, and start over with my business partner. There were discussions about selling the house, moving to Portland, and how Jon would buy out my share of the business for fair market value, a number that was about half of what my half was actually worth. The last message, sent 3 days ago, made my hands shake with fury. Can't wait to get back and tell Gabe the truth. Poor guy won't know what hit him. You're right, though. We should wait until after the business evaluation is complete. Don't want him getting suspicious and hiding assets. I set the iPad down carefully and walked to the kitchen, where I opened a beer and started planning. Beth thought she was playing chess while I was playing checkers. Time to show her the difference between an electrician who'd built a business from nothing and a woman who'd never worked a day in her life. My phone rang. Beth's name appeared on the screen. "Hi, honey," I answered, proud of how normal my voice sounded. "Gabe, I've been thinking. I might need a little more time, maybe another week or two." "Whatever you need, sweetheart. The girls and I are doing fine." "You're being very understanding about this. Marriage is about supporting each other, right? If you need time to find yourself, I want you to have it." There was a pause. "I love you, Gabe." "I love you too, Beth." And the crazy thing was, part of me still did, which was going to make destroying her so much more satisfying. After I hung up, I called my lawyer. Dana Morrison had been handling legal work for Parrish Electric since the beginning. She was sharp, ruthless when necessary, and had no patience for people who tried to take advantage of her clients. When I walked into her office Friday morning with Beth's iPad, she listened to my story with the focused attention of a predator sizing up prey. "How long have you suspected?" she asked, scrolling through the messages. I didn't. I mean, I knew something was off, but I thought maybe she was having some kind of midlife crisis. Depression, maybe. I never imagined she was planning to take me for everything I've worked for. Dana nodded, making notes. "The business partnership agreement we drew up has protections, but if Jon's planning to manipulate the valuation process, we need to be proactive. I'll need copies of everything on this iPad." "Already done." I handed her a flash drive. "There's more. I started digging into Jon's finances yesterday. He's been living beyond his means for months. New car, expensive dinners, weekend trips. On paper, his half of the business doesn't generate that kind of income." "You think he's been skimming?" "I think he's been preparing for this longer than Beth has. Question is, how far are they willing to go?" Dana leaned back in her chair. "What do you want to do, Gabe? We can file for divorce immediately, use these messages as evidence of adultery. In this state, that affects asset division. I want to do more than that. I want them to understand exactly who they tried to screw over. Be careful. Don't do anything that could hurt you legally. I'm not planning to break any laws, but I didn't build my business by rolling over when people tried to cheat me." I left Dana's office with a plan forming in my mind. Step 1 was gathering more evidence. Step 2 was making sure Jon and Beth's scheme blew up in their faces so spectacularly that they'd never recover. My first stop was the office. Parrish Electric operated out of a converted warehouse on the industrial side of town. We had a showroom up front, offices in the middle, and a workshop in the back where we stored equipment and materials. Jon's office was right next to mine, separated by a thin wall that had never provided much privacy. I'd always trusted Jon completely. We'd met when I hired his previous company for a big commercial job, and he'd impressed me with his knowledge of electrical systems and his sales ability. When his old boss retired, I'd offered him a partnership. Jon brought clients and expertise, I brought experience and work ethic. It had seemed like a perfect match. Now I was seeing everything differently. Jon's expensive suits, his lease on a BMW that matched Beth's, his frequent client dinners that always seemed to happen when I was working late or out of town. How long had I been the sucker in this arrangement? Mark Stevens, our office manager, looked up when I walked in. Mark was 26, fresh out of college, and handled our books with the precision of someone who actually cared about the business. "Hey, Gabe, Jon's not in today. Said he had client meetings all afternoon." "Actually, I wanted to talk to you. Got a minute?" Mark followed me into my office, and I closed the door. "I need you to run some reports for me, quietly. I want to see Jon's expense accounts for the past 6 months, his client billing, and any unusual transactions." Mark's expression grew serious. "Is everything okay?" "I'm not sure yet. That's what I'm trying to find out. Give me an hour." While Mark worked on the financial reports, I drove across town to visit someone who might have more insight into Jon's recent activities, his ex-girlfriend Valerie Chen. Valerie managed a restaurant downtown, and she dated Jon for 2 years before their relationship ended badly about 6 months ago. I'd only met her a few times, but she'd struck me as intelligent and direct. If Jon had been cheating on her too, she might be willing to share information. I found her in the restaurant's office, working on scheduling. She looked surprised to see me, but invited me to sit down. "This is about Jon, isn't it?" she said before I could explain why I was there. "What makes you say that?" "Because I've been wondering when someone would finally figure out what he's really like. Your wife know he's been telling people they're moving in together?" My stomach clenched, but I kept my voice steady. "When did he tell you that?" "Last month. He came by here drunk, talking about how he was finally going to have everything he deserved. Said he was tired of being the junior partner in your business and tired of wanting something he couldn't have." Something he couldn't have? Your life, your house, your wife, your success. Jon's always been jealous of you, Gabe. I tried to tell him that constantly comparing himself to his business partner wasn't healthy, but he wouldn't listen. Valerie leaned forward, her expression sympathetic. I'm sorry. I probably should have said something earlier, but it wasn't really my business. It's not your fault. I should have seen it myself. Men like Jon are good at hiding their true nature. He can be charming when he wants something, but underneath, he's selfish and manipulative. Your wife's going to figure that out eventually, but probably not until after he's gotten what he wants from her. I thanked Valerie and drove back to the office, my anger building with every mile. Jon hadn't just betrayed our friendship and business partnership, he'd been systematically planning to take over my life. Mark was waiting with a stack of printouts and a grim expression. You're not going to like this, he said, spreading the papers across my desk. Jon's been billing personal expenses to client accounts, then moving the money around to make it look legitimate. Nothing huge, but it adds up. Maybe $15,000 over 6 months. $15,000? And that's just what I found in an hour. If I dig deeper, do it. I want everything documented. Mark hesitated. Gabe, if Jon finds out I'm investigating his accounts, he won't find out from me. And if this goes where I think it's going, you'll be working for a different company soon anyway. That evening, I cooked dinner for the girls and tried to act normal, but my mind was racing. I had evidence of Jon's financial improprieties and Valerie's confirmation that he'd been planning this takeover for months. Combined with the messages on Beth's iPad, I had enough to destroy both of them legally and financially. But I wanted more than that. I wanted them to experience the same humiliation and betrayal they'd planned for me. My phone buzzed with a text from Beth. Missing you and the girls. Can't wait to come home and start fresh. I stared at the message, marveling at her ability to lie so easily. She was planning to come home and blow up our family, and she was talking about starting fresh. I typed back, we miss you too. Take all the time you need. Then I opened my laptop and started researching private investigators. Stan Kowalski looked exactly like what you'd expect from a private investigator. Rumpled clothes, coffee-stained tie, and the tired eyes of a man who'd seen too much of humanity's worst impulses. He'd been recommended by Dana, and his reputation for discretion and thoroughness was exactly what I needed. Your wife and your business partner, he said, reviewing the information I'd provided. Classic setup? How long you want me to follow them? However long it takes to document everything, I want photos, locations, times, witnesses. If they're planning to screw me over, I want evidence that will hold up in court and in the court of public opinion. Public opinion? These people think they're smarter than me, Stan. They think they can destroy my life and walk away clean. I want to make sure that when this is over, everyone in town knows exactly who they really are. Stan nodded approvingly. I like a client who thinks strategically. Give me a week. While Stan worked his investigation, I focused on the business side. Mark's deeper dive into Jon's finances revealed a pattern of systematic theft that went back almost a year. Jon had been skimming money from client payments, inflating expense reports, and even billing personal purchases to company accounts. The total was close to $40,000. This is enough for criminal charges, Dana told me when I brought her the evidence. Embezzlement, fraud, breach of fiduciary duty. Jon could go to prison. I want to handle this my way first. Can you prepare the paperwork to dissolve the partnership and buy out his share based on the actual value, minus what he's stolen? Absolutely. But Gabe, if you're planning some kind of confrontation, be careful. Document everything, and don't do anything that could be construed as threatening or illegal. I'm not going to threaten him, Dana. I'm going to give him exactly what he deserves. That Friday, I called Jon and asked him to come to the office for a partnership meeting. I told him I wanted to discuss some new contracts and potential expansion plans. He sounded eager, probably thinking this was part of Beth's timeline for their takeover. I scheduled the meeting for 3 p.m., when most of our employees would be out on job sites, but Mark would still be in the office. I wanted witnesses, but I also wanted to control the audience. Jon arrived right on time, wearing one of his expensive suits and carrying a leather portfolio that probably cost more than my work boots. He looked confident, relaxed, like a man who thought he was about to win the lottery. Gabe, good to see you. You sounded excited about these new opportunities. I am excited, Jon. Very excited. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. Have a seat. He settled in, crossing his legs and opening his portfolio. So what are we looking at? Commercial contracts? Residential development? Actually, I wanted to talk about partnership evaluation and asset distribution. Jon's expression didn't change, but I caught a flicker of something in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or concern. Okay, what about it? Well, I've been thinking about Beth's suggestion that we get the business professionally appraised. For estate planning purposes, you understand. Now Jon looked confused. Beth's suggestion? Come on, Jon, we're friends. Beth told me you two have been discussing the future of the business. She thinks it would be smart to know exactly what we're each worth. I watched Jon process this, trying to figure out how much I knew and how much I was guessing. I may have mentioned something about business planning, he said carefully, but I wouldn't call it a formal suggestion. Right, business planning. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a manila folder. Speaking of which, I had Mark run some reports on our finances. Found some interesting discrepancies. I slid the folder across the desk. Jon opened it and went pale as he saw the evidence of his theft laid out in neat columns and highlighted totals. Gabe, I can explain. I'm sure you can. Just like you can explain why you've been sleeping with my wife and planning to steal my business. Jon's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I don't know what you're talking about. I pulled out Beth's iPad and set it on the desk between us. Really? Because I have about 6 months of text messages that suggest otherwise. Jon stared at the iPad, his face cycling through several emotions. Shock, fear, anger, and finally, resignation. How long have you known? Long enough. The question is, what are we going to do about it? Jon straightened in his chair, and I saw a flash of the arrogance that had been hiding under his friendly facade. Look, Gabe, I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but Beth and I, we're in love. It wasn't planned. It just happened. It just happened? For 6 months? While you were stealing from our business and planning to cheat me out of my fair share? The business issues are separate. The hell they are. I stood up, my voice rising. You've been systematically stealing from me while screwing my wife and planning to take over everything I've built. You think that's separate? Mark appeared in the doorway, drawn by the raised voices. Everything okay in here? Mark, come in. Jon and I are just discussing some business irregularities you discovered. Jon shot me a warning look. Gabe, let's keep this between us. Why? Embarrassed? You weren't embarrassed when you were planning to humiliate me. I turned to Mark. Show Jon what you found in his expense accounts. Mark looked uncomfortable but pulled out his own folder. The discrepancies total about $40,000 over the past year. Falsified receipts, personal expenses billed to clients, unauthorized transfers. That's enough, Jon snapped. This is a private partnership matter. Not anymore, it isn't. I walked around the desk until I was standing directly in front of Jon. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to sign dissolution papers that buy out your partnership share at fair market value, minus the $40,000 you stole. You're going to resign immediately, and you're going to stay away from my wife and my family. Jon stood up, trying to use his height advantage to intimidate me. And if I don't? Then I file criminal charges for embezzlement, and I make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of man you are. You can't prove anything about Beth and me. I picked up the iPad and scrolled to one of the more explicit photos. Want to bet? Jon's face went red. You're making a mistake, Gabe. Beth doesn't love you anymore. She hasn't for years. I'm offering her something you never could? What's that? Passion, excitement, a man who appreciates what he has instead of taking it for granted. I almost laughed. You mean a man who steals from his business partner and breaks up families? Yeah, that's real exciting. Jon moved closer, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. This isn't over. Beth and I are going to be together whether you like it or not. And when the dust settles, you're going to realize you lost the best thing you ever had. The best thing I ever had was my daughters and my business. Beth made her choice. Now she gets to live with the consequences. I stepped back and gestured toward the door. Get out of my office, Jon, and don't come back. Jon grabbed his portfolio and headed for the door, but he turned back for one last shot. Enjoy your victory, Gabe. It won't last long. After he left, Mark and I stood in the silence of the office, processing what had just happened. Holy shit, Mark finally said. Sorry, but holy shit. Yeah. Think you can handle running things for a few days while I deal with the legal paperwork? Absolutely. Gabe, I'm sorry about your wife. Thanks, Mark, but honestly, I'm starting to think this might be the best thing that ever happened to me. That evening, I called Beth. Hi, honey. She answered, her voice bright with fake cheerfulness. Hey, how's the soul-searching going? Really well. I'm learning a lot about myself, about what I want from life. That's great. Listen, I wanted to let you know that Jon and I dissolved our partnership today. There was a long pause. What? Why? Financial irregularities. Turns out he's been stealing from the business. I had to let him go. Gabe, that's terrible. Are you sure? Maybe it's just a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding. I have documentation going back months. Dana's handling the legal side. Another pause. What does this mean for the business? It means I own it completely now, which is probably for the best, considering what I've learned about Jon's character. What do you mean? Ask him yourself, Beth. I'm sure he'll tell you all about it. I hung up and poured myself a beer, feeling better than I had in months. Jon was out of my business and my life. Now I just had to wait for Beth to make her next move. I didn't have to wait long. Beth came home on a Tuesday morning, 3 days after my confrontation with Jon. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard her car in the driveway, followed by the sound of her key in the front door. Gabe? Girls? She called out. Kitchen, I replied calmly. She appeared in the doorway looking like she'd been driving all night. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup smudged, and her clothes wrinkled. This wasn't the triumphant return of a woman ready to start her new life. This was someone whose plans had just fallen apart. We need to talk, she said. I figured. Coffee? This isn't a social visit, Gabe. What you did to Jon was wrong. He made some mistakes with the business finances, but that doesn't give you the right to destroy his life. I poured myself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter, studying my wife. His life? What about my life, Beth? What about our marriage, our family, our business? That's different. How is it different? Because... She struggled to find words that would make her betrayal sound reasonable. Because Jon and I didn't plan for this to happen. We fell in love. Sometimes people can't help who they love. But they can help whether they act on it. They can help whether they lie and cheat and steal. Beth's expression hardened. I want you to drop the charges against Jon. I haven't filed charges, yet. And I want you to give him his fair share of the business. I almost choked on my coffee. His fair share? Beth, he stole $40,000 from our company. He was planning to cheat me out of my life's work. What part of that entitles him to a fair share of anything? He made mistakes, but he's a good man. Better than you've been to me in years. Better how? Because he told you what you wanted to hear while he was planning to screw over your husband? Beth stepped closer, her voice rising. At least he pays attention to me. At least he makes me feel like I matter. And stealing from my business was part of making you feel special? He was going to pay it back? With what money, Beth? He was living beyond his means before he started stealing from me. Where exactly was this payback money going to come from? She didn't have an answer for that, which told me Jon hadn't shared the details of his financial planning with her. He'd been using her just as much as she'd been using me. I want a divorce, she said finally. Okay. Beth blinked, clearly expecting more resistance. Okay? Okay, I'll call Dana this morning and start the paperwork. I want half of everything. The house, the business, the investments. That's not how it works when one spouse commits adultery, Beth. Especially when the adultery involves conspiracy to defraud the other spouse. You can't prove conspiracy. I pulled out her iPad and set it on the kitchen counter. Want to bet? Beth stared at the device, her face going pale. You went through my private messages? Your private messages about stealing my business and destroying my life? Yeah, I read those. Those messages were taken out of context? Really? Which context makes poor guy won't know what hit him? Sound innocent? Beth grabbed for the iPad, but I was faster. Give me that. It's evidence now, Beth. Dana has copies of everything. Oh, you bastard. You planned this whole thing. I planned it. I'm not the one who's been screwing my spouse's business partner for 6 months while planning to steal his company. Beth's mask of righteous indignation finally slipped, revealing the calculating woman underneath. Fine. You want to play hardball? Jon and I will start our own electrical business. We'll take your clients, your employees, your reputation. When we're done, Parrish Electric will be worthless. Good luck with that. Hard to start a business when one partner is facing embezzlement charges and the other has no money or credit. What do you mean, no money? I mean your credit cards are canceled, your access to our joint accounts is suspended, and your allowance just ended. You want to leave me for Jon? Go ahead. But you're not taking my life's work with you. Beth stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. You can't do that. I'm your wife. You're my soon-to-be ex-wife who's been conspiring to defraud me. There's a difference. The girls will hate you for this. The girls will understand that their father protected his family from people who tried to destroy it. Beth's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it, and her expression grew even more desperate. That's Jon, isn't it? I asked. Let me guess. He's having second thoughts about this whole plan now that it's blown up in his face. He's not having second thoughts. He loves me. He loves the idea of you, Beth. He loves the fantasy of taking over my life. But now that it's going to cost him everything, let's see how much he really loves you. Beth's phone buzzed again. Then again. Answer it, I suggested. Let's hear what Prince Charming has to say now. Beth reluctantly answered the phone. Jon? Even from across the kitchen, I could hear Jon's agitated voice through the speaker. Beth's face grew paler with each word. What do you mean you can't see me anymore? She said. Jon, we planned this together. What about Portland? What about starting over? More frantic talking from Jon's end. But you said you loved me? You said we were going to build a life together? I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Beth ended the call and stood staring at her phone like it might spontaneously combust. Let me guess, I said. Jon's decided that love doesn't conquer all, especially when all includes criminal charges and financial ruin. He just needs time to think. This is all happening so fast. Beth, he used you, just like you tried to use me. The only difference is he's smarter than you are. He knows when to cut his losses. My wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, sank into a kitchen chair, the reality of her situation finally hitting her. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now you move out. You get a job. You figure out how to support yourself without my money or Jon's promises. You learn what the real world is like for people who have to work for what they want instead of scheming to take it from others. And the girls? The girls will live with me. You can have supervised visitation until you prove you're stable enough for more. Supervised? Gabe, I'm their mother. You're a mother who was planning to uproot their lives, move them away from their friends and school, and destroy their father's business. That doesn't sound like someone who puts her children's welfare first. Beth started crying, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of frustration and self-pity. This isn't fair, she sobbed. I just wanted to be happy. You were happy, Beth. You had a good life, a successful husband, beautiful daughters, financial security, but that wasn't enough for you. You wanted excitement, drama, passion. Well, congratulations. You got all three. I finished my coffee and rinsed the mug in the sink. I'm going to work. I suggest you start packing. Dana will be in touch about the divorce proceedings. As I headed for the door, Beth called after me. What am I supposed to tell people? How do I explain this? I turned back to look at her one last time. Tell them the truth, Beth. Tell them you threw away 16 years of marriage and a good life because you thought you deserved better. Tell them you conspired with my business partner to steal everything I'd worked for. Tell them you chose a thief and a liar over your family. People won't understand. You're right. They won't. And that's something you're going to have to live with for the rest of your life. I left Beth crying in our kitchen and drove to work, feeling lighter than I had in years. The hardest part was over. Now came the satisfaction of watching her and Jon face the consequences of their choices. That afternoon, I got a call from Stan, my private investigator. Got some interesting photos for you, he said. Your wife and her boyfriend had quite the argument outside his apartment complex this morning. Looks like their love affair hit some turbulence. Send me everything. And Stan, good work. My pleasure. Always enjoy a case where the good guy wins. The photos showed Beth and Jon in what was clearly a heated argument. Jon was gesturing angrily while Beth appeared to be pleading with him. In the final shots, Jon walked away, leaving Beth standing alone in the parking lot. I forwarded the photos to Dana with a note. Looks like the conspiracy is falling apart. Her reply came back immediately. Perfect. This makes our case even stronger. That evening, I sat down with Becca and Brianna to explain what was happening. They took it better than I expected, probably because they'd sensed the tension in our house for months. Are you and Mom getting divorced? Brianna asked. Yes, sweetheart. We are. Is it because of that man who used to come over when you weren't here? Becca asked. I stared at my 15-year-old daughter. You knew about Jon? We're not stupid, Dad. Mom thought we didn't notice, but we saw how she acted when he was around, and we heard them talking on the phone sometimes. Why didn't you say anything? What were we supposed to say? Brianna asked. We figured you'd handle it when you were ready. I pulled both girls into a hug, amazed by their resilience and maturity. You know this isn't your fault, right? And it doesn't change how much your mother and I love you. We know, Dad, Becca said. We just want things to be normal again. They will be. Different, but normal. That night, after the girls were asleep, I sat on my back deck with a beer and thought about the future. For the first time in months, I was looking forward to it. 2 weeks after Beth moved out, I was starting to settle into a new routine when everything went sideways. It was a Thursday evening, and I was helping Brianna with her math homework when the doorbell rang. Through the front window, I could see Jon standing on my porch. He looked like hell, unshaven, wrinkled clothes, the kind of desperate appearance that comes from having your life fall apart in real time. "Stay here," I told the girls, and answered the door. "We need to talk," Jon said without preamble. "No, we don't. You're trespassing. Get off my property." 5 minutes, Gabe. Just give me 5 minutes to explain." "Explain what? How you stole from my business? How you screwed my wife? How you plan to destroy everything I've built? Which part needs explanation?" Jon glanced around nervously, like he was worried about neighbors watching. "Can I at least come inside?" "Absolutely not. My daughters are here, and I don't want them exposed to whatever desperation brought you to my door." "Look, I know you're angry." "Angry doesn't begin to cover it, Jon. You betrayed 15 years of friendship and partnership. You stole from me. You destroyed my marriage. Angry is what I was 2 weeks ago. Now I'm just disgusted." Jon's facade of reasonableness cracked. "Your marriage was already over, Gabe. Beth was miserable. She told me how you ignored her, how you took her for granted, how you cared more about your business than your family. And you were just the good Samaritan who helped her through her difficult time? I was someone who appreciated her, someone who saw her as more than just a convenient wife and mother." "Someone who saw her as a convenient way to steal my business, you mean?" "The business was my idea. I brought in most of the commercial clients. I developed the relationships that made us profitable. You just did the grunt work." There it was, the arrogance and entitlement that had been hiding under Jon's friendly facade for years. "The grunt work? You mean building the company from nothing? Establishing our reputation? Working 16-hour days while you schmozzed clients at expensive restaurants?" "I brought value to the partnership. You brought theft and betrayal. That's the only value you ever added." Jon stepped closer, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "You think you've won, but this isn't over. Beth and I are going to fight the divorce settlement. We're going to challenge your buyout of my partnership share. When we're done, you'll be lucky to keep half of what you think you own." "With what money?" "You're broke, Jon. Your credit is ruined, your reputation is destroyed, and Beth has no assets of her own. What are you going to fight with?" "I have friends in this business, people who know my worth." "Had friends, past tense. Word travels fast in our industry, and everyone knows what you did. Nobody's going to risk their reputation associating with a thief." Jon's mask slipped completely, revealing the ugly desperation underneath. "You sanctimonious bastard. You act like you're so much better than everyone else, but you're just a small-town electrician who got lucky. Beth saw through your act, and so do I. And yet, this small-town electrician outsmarted both of you." "This isn't over," Jon repeated, backing toward his car. "I'm going to make you pay for what you've done to me." "I didn't do anything to you, Jon. You did it to yourself. When you decided to steal from me, when you decided to betray our friendship, when you decided to destroy my family, those were your choices. Now you get to live with the consequences." Jon got in his car and drove away, but something about his demeanor worried me. He had the look of a man who'd lost everything and had nothing left to lose. That made him dangerous. I called Dana the next morning and told her about Jon's visit. "File a restraining order," she advised. "If he's making threats, we need to document everything." "What about his threat to challenge the divorce settlement and partnership buyout?" "Empty bluster. He has no standing to challenge your divorce, and the partnership dissolution is ironclad. He's grasping at straws." "Maybe, but desperate people do stupid things." "True. Be careful, Gabe, and call the police if he shows up again." That weekend, I took the girls to their soccer games and tried to maintain some normalcy, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Jon wasn't done causing trouble. My instincts proved correct on Sunday evening when Becca came running into the house in tears. "Dad, someone broke into the workshop." I ran outside to find the side door to my workshop hanging open, the lock smashed. Inside was chaos. Tools were scattered across the floor, equipment was overturned, and someone had spray-painted "thief" across my workbench. But the real damage was to my truck. All 4 tires had been slashed, the windshield was smashed, and the same word, "thief," was keyed into the paint on both sides. I called the police, and Officer Martinez arrived within 15 minutes. He surveyed the damage with the expression of a man who'd seen too much petty revenge in his career. "Any idea who might have done this?" he asked. "I have a pretty good idea." I told him about Jon's visit and threats. "We'll dust for prints, but if this guy's smart, he wore gloves. You have security cameras?" "Not on the workshop. I'm going to install some this week." "Good idea. In the meantime, I'll have patrol cars swing by your house more frequently." After the police left, I stood in the wreck of my workshop with something colder than anger in my chest. Jon didn't just vandalize my business. He brought it to my home, close enough for my daughters to feel it. That made it personal. I called Stan, my private investigator, and told him to tail Jon again, nonstop. If Jon was desperate enough to escalate, I wanted proof, not guesses. 3 days later, Stan called from his car. Jon had met Beth for 2 hours at a downtown coffee shop, then went straight to a hardware store and bought a crowbar, bolt cutters, and spray paint. After that, he parked near my neighborhood and waited. I didn't sleep much that night. Instead, I set up motion cameras around my property and made sure everything recorded. Then I called my neighbor Mike Henderson, a retired Marine, and asked him to keep watch after I left for work. "Call the cops," I told him, "and film everything." In the morning, I drove out at my normal time, then parked a few blocks away and circled back through the woods behind my house. Stan texted that Jon was moving on foot, trying to stay hidden. I watched him slip onto my property with a duffel bag, pry open the workshop door, and disappear inside. I heard tools clatter, heard the ugly sound of damage. Then he came back out and headed toward my truck. That's when Mike stepped out, phone up, recording. He shouted, and Jon bolted, dropping his bag as he ran. He didn't get far. 2 patrol cars screamed into the street and took him down in front of half the neighborhood. Bolt cutters and spray paint were still sitting in his bag like a confession. As they shoved him into the back of the cruiser, Jon screamed that I'd set him up and that it wasn't over. I stared at him and said the only truth that mattered. It was over the moment he decided to bring this to my house. Later, my lawyer called. Jon was facing vandalism, trespassing, and harassment, and his record made it worse. Beth's meeting with him right before the attack didn't help her either. That night, I sat on my back deck watching my daughters play, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Beth texted, "I'm sorry. I deleted it. Some apologies are too late, and some endings are the kind you earn."